Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Carefulist, the podcast. Today, we are really excited to listen to and learn from June Marcangeli. She has a unique experience in that she was a caregiver and then she became someone who needed care. So, welcome to Carefulist, the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to share my experience and, see if anyone can learn from what I went through.
Yes. Well, thank you for your willingness to be open. I know these things can be difficult to talk about, but part of our mission is to get this conversation going so that people feel a little bit more comfortable talking with other folks and sharing their experience and their story. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess let's start there. Can you tell me a little bit about your caregiving story when you were taking care of someone else?
Well, it started about maybe 12 years ago when my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer,
Okay.
devastating disease. And in the first phase, it was, mild to moderate. We kind of like, we can laugh about it. Oh, that she forgot thing is cute. But then
Mhm.
when it reaches moderate to severe, where she really need 24 hours care, that's become very challenging for me and my brother. I have
Mhm.
a brother, and being Asian, our culture is we don't really put our elderly in the nursing home.
Right.
So we were lucky that we have that mindset that allow us to keep her at my brother's place.
Okay.
So that was rough in the last maybe 2 years when she's no longer can be left alone. And last year she passed at the
Sorry.
apartment. So
Mhm.
we have the hospice care
Okay.
that comes. So that's another service that I think is great if anyone have the capability to accommodate that, because I think it's the best place, even though she doesn't remember, she's not aware, but I think deep down she would like to pass in her comfort of her own, her home.
Right.
So that
Sure.
was something that I appreciate that we have that option.
Mhm.
And then that was last, and then this year becoming transition from a caregiver to a patient. So this year in July, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm.
And that's when you know that other people is gonna have to worry about how you're gonna do, how it's gonna turn out,
Yeah.
and weigh heavily on me
Sure.
because I'm a mom and I have a daughter. Breast cancer, that's the first thing you think, am I gonna pass anything to my daughter?
Right.
So I think the toughest part is not the physical part that you have to go through the test, it's the mental. How are you
Mhm.
going to handle managing your loved one expectation, especially the first
Yeah.
week of you just got the news and you don't know the details.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That period of waiting
Yeah.
is terrible. It's, I've heard from other folks that sometimes the waiting is worse than the treatment itself.
It is, especially as I said, when you have a daughter, I said, what kind of conversation am I going to have with her? I cannot
Right.
until I have all the facts. So I have
Yes.
to wait until maybe a week after my diagnosis to get the test, the genetic test back,
Hmm.
so that I have something positive to tell her, like, okay, mom has
Right.
this. Guess what? I'm not passing on to you. But
Yeah.
that 1 week of not knowing is really because it can change her life. Because the
Right.
first thing when we have the conversation, she asked right away, so mom, do I need to have a mammography? She's
Hmm.
23, so she doesn't really know the detail. I say, no, don't worry about it. But she
Yeah.
already worry and thinking about what she needs to do.
Right. Yes. And as a mother, you're more concerned for your child than you are for
Yes,
yourself. Yeah, of
yes, yes.
course.
But as you said, the waiting is the most difficult part. And
Mhm.
another waiting, that's 1 week. And another test is 2 weeks waiting to see
Ugh.
if the chance of cancer can come back. So they have this test
Mhm.
that kind of give you a score. And
Mhm.
based on that test, whether you're going to need chemo or not. And that's
Okay.
another big thing because chemo is, as we know, is the one that really, really rough.
Yes.
So that
Right.
it came back that my oncolytic score was really low, which means recurrent is really low. I don't need chemo, but that 2 weeks of don't know what to plan.
Right.
Because we are all about planning at our age because we also have jobs, right?
Yep.
We have family. So we want to be able to plan on how long am I going to be on disability, what kind
Hmm.
of activity I need to alter. And that two
Right.
week is, I would say that I was in a limbo, like
Hmm.
stagnant. You don't know what to do. You can't do anything. You just sit and just wish for the best. But
Right.
once they have the result is back, then you can move on to the next phase. My first phase was lumpectomy and the
Okay.
lymph node biopsy. So that
Mm-hmm.
went pretty smoothly. It's like any, I would call minor surgery because the size is really small of my tumor. But
Hmm.
the waiting of that 2 weeks, don't know.
Ah,
That's,
yes.
yeah. So that's the
Right.
toughest part. And it's important to have a support system that can kind of
Yeah.
calm you. But in my case, the waiting is worse on my family.
Right.
Because, being that I'm in kind of in the regular in healthcare, I work with pharmaceutical company that we know a lot about physician and how they treat and
Mhm.
the treatment protocol. So when the doctor told me, like, based on what I see, I don't think you have to worry about chemo and that. And I get
Mhm.
it because I trust her. But
Right.
I say the same thing to my husband and my daughter. They don't get it because they
Right.
need
Well,
proof.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're not in that space and you're
Mm,
not regularly having those types of conversations, a diagnosis is that much more worrisome
yeah.
because a lot of words are being used that you may not be familiar with,
Mhm.
the process and trying to figure out how to help yourself. So, um, yeah, for that, I'm glad that you were able to find some peace
Yeah.
knowing what the process is. Um, but I am sorry that your family was so concerned, as families, are because they love you.
And they always somehow, when you hear the word cancer, most people always kind of like go to the worst, right?
Yeah,
Worst case scenario
right.
instead of best case scenario. For me, a glass half full, but
Hmm.
you have to watch them worry and try to hide it because they don't
Yeah,
want to add on to your worries. That was
right.
like, to me, the most difficult part.
Yeah, yeah. It's so hard to watch your loved ones struggle and know that there isn't anything you can do. And in this case, and in a lot of cases, you felt that way for them and they felt that way for you. And it was just coming from, two different perspectives, but always that place of love and care. Um,
One thing I learned is that you just have to be honest, good or bad.
mhm.
Like I always tell them,
Yeah,
hey, if the score come back high and I need chemo, I'm fine with that. Because
right.
the strength, you have to show them your strength in order for them to absorb that. Because if
Mhm.
you use like, oh my God, I'm gonna, this is gonna happen. I'm so worried. That doesn't help. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you've had a rough year and a half to 2 years, and then of course all of the care prior to that
Mhm.
with your mom. How are you able to keep your sense of humor or find joy? Because sometimes humor is hard to find, and then you just have to look for those little glimmers of joy in what are otherwise very tough circumstances.
Well, one thing that I learned, humor, when I was talking to my surgeon,
Mhm.
and sitting there and waiting, wow, she has a tough job. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone that she's seeing, either terminal or not, but it's cancer. But she
right.
always very funny. And I appreciate that. And maybe that's her coping mechanism.
Hmm.
And looking at her, I'm like, who am I to complain? When my diagnosis is the best that I can have for breast cancer.
Yeah.
So you have to really look at the positive side. I never compare myself to the worst case scenario. I always
Hmm.
look at the silver lining. Like, for example, it's stage 1A, right?
Mhm.
It's like the best case scenario. And I have insurance that
Mhm.
cover, all the treatment. I'm in good health. Like
Mhm.
instead of like going to the dark side of like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Am I gonna die? So that attitude is something that anyone can adopt, positive
Mhm.
self-talk. This is going to be okay. This is going to be okay. Let's fight this. Let's talk. Let's go over the option. And the doctors that you have, I think, is also important. The one I
Mhm.
have is very supportive and make light, and doesn't scare you.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that all of them have that kind of bedside manner. So I think
Mhm.
that's really important too.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredibly important. And I know when we had spoken before, you talked about how important it is to be healthy before something happens because it improves your chances of, getting better or having a faster recovery. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yes, and I have to give credit to my mom diagnosis of Alzheimer
Okay.
because when she was diagnosed, I was like maybe 50. I'm 58 now.
Mhm.
And at 50, and I was not, I give myself all the reason not to be working out. Oh,
Mhm.
I don't have weight issue. I'm healthy. Why would I need to go to the gym? But then when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer and being that in the field that I am, my clients are doctors. So I always say, hey, what should I do? We know that there's no treatment. And
Mhm.
many of them say, June, the only way that you can do is stay healthy physically and mentally, like doing crossword puzzle and all of that. And that's when I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, if there's no cure, I have to do everything I could to prevent. And the best way that I have control is to stay healthy. So at
Mhm.
50, I hit the gym. Oh my God, I'm like, because I don't want to die. Or like every time I forget, I'm like, oh my God, I have early Alzheimer. No, 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 no. I have to fight back. So I hit the gym and I changed my routine. So it's become part of my day-to-day routine is to stay healthy.
Mhm.
And that kind of like when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I know that my baseline health is strong enough that my recovery would go smoothly. But
Yeah.
let's go back 2 years. I don't think I mentioned to you 2 years earlier. Okay, I had a rough 3 years before my mom passed. I have a hysterectomy as
Oh.
well. But it's not because of cancer. I have fibroid and it was growing. And
Mhm.
I'm like, you know what? At this age, I was very, very proactive about preventative. I said,
Mhm.
I don't need a uterus. This thing
Mhm.
is growing. Just take it out.
Yeah.
Because my aunt died of cervical cancer. And as you know,
Okay.
woman, as when you become postmenopausal, so many things can go wrong,
Right.
right? And for me, I'm like, you know what? I don't expect to have any child at this age.
Mhm.
Remove it so that I don't have to worry about having uterine cancer, fallopian, cervical cancer. So that
Right.
was 2 years ago. And because I was in such good shape, I have an open surgery. You talk about
Mhm.
8 inches incision, but I
Yep.
was able to recover quickly because I was healthy and strong.
Right.
So I cannot say enough that every day people think about cardiovascular and other things to stay healthy. There's more to that. When you
Right.
have surgery, and if you're not healthy, the recovery can be really, really rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the strength training and all of those types of
Hmm.
things and making sure that your muscles are strong. Um, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot
Hmm.
for myself as I'm
Yeah.
advancing through my 40s.
And then
And
the earlier you start, the easier it's become part of your habit.
right, right. So, as we're talking about healthy and making things a little bit easier for ourselves from a proactive standpoint, do you have any foods or recipes or things that you would make either as a caregiver or that you were eating as you were receiving treatment for your breast cancer?
Yes, usually when you're recovering, your appetite is not really there. Like,
Yeah.
and you have to force yourself to eat so that you don't lose too much weight.
Right.
And to me, I always defaulted back to comfort food, like soup, all kinds of soup that I like because it's easy to digest. And sometimes, I mean, literally, you don't want to chew. You just like, right? With soup,
Right.
it's very easy. And what I usually do, I would make one big pot and then section it and put it in the freezer.
Oh,
Because
great
at
idea.
that time, when you recovery, your energy is like maybe half just for you to
Yeah.
do anything. And you don't want to default on like, okay, I'm not going to eat because I don't want to cook. Right. So you
Right.
break it down. So a lot of us do that. Oh, I don't want to bother. I don't have energy to cook, so I'm going to skip a meal. And you keep
Hmm.
skipping, you keep losing weight. There goes your recovery. So I
Right.
would do one cooking of a big pot of soup and would last me maybe, let's say, five uh meals. So
Hmm.
the worst I can do, okay, I'm lazy. I don't want to eat. Put it in a defrost, and you have a meal. And
Right.
also multivitamins. I never
Mm.
skip on that because you know that if you're just going to have soup, you're not going to get all your nutrient, right? You want to stay
Hmm.
hydrated. So you always want to make sure what vitamins you need during your recovery. Let's say if you have an open surgery, you lose a lot of blood and
Hmm.
you need to build up your calcium. So those are the things that you want to supplement with.
Right. And that's always a great conversation to have with your surgeon or
Mhm.
your primary care provider to ensure that you're not missing any vitamins that you should be
Mhm.
taking, and to also ensure that there's no interaction of any kind.
Yes.
But absolutely, you should have that conversation and make sure that you're not missing anything that's important for your recovery. Um, so let's take one quick little step back. You were a caregiver for your mom
Hmm.
and she passed and you're dealing with that, and I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for that because my mom passed in 2023 as well. Um, and when you're a caregiver, it's really easy to put yourself in the back seat, or you're dealing with so many of their appointments that you don't get to yours, or you intend to but something happens and you don't get around to that. So was there anything that happened for you that you had to take the back seat for a little while and appointments just didn't happen?
Yes, yes. It's a combination of like my mom passed last year, 2023, same year as what happened to you. And then I moved to Connecticut from New York. So you have a new place, mom passing, and my daughter graduating from college the same year.
Oh my gosh, all the life changes at once.
And so my mom passed in May, and then my husband's mom passed in October. So all of that happening in 1 year, and when you're
Yeah.
supposed to have your mammogram schedule, and
Hmm.
then oops, no, his funeral is this day, right? Let's
Yeah.
postpone it.
Right.
So one thing, and you keep postponing it, right?
Yes.
Because based on my history, I do it every year, and I have two growth before in my life, one at 30 and one at around 50, and it was benign.
Hmm.
So in my mind, I'm like, oh, let's see if they found a third one. The first two was benign, so I wasn't worried about
Yeah.
postponing it. I said, I'll get to it.
Right.
Like instead of March, I didn't
Hmm.
get to it till like August,
Yeah.
right? But luckily, even when I got to it, that later in the year, it was still small because I do it every year. And
Right.
since then, I've been talking to my friend, and I'm so surprised how many skip due to, like we said,
Yep.
busy or don't think that it can happen to you or
Hmm.
it's no big deal.
Yeah.
I'll get
Or
to
you
it.
don't want to know, the fear
Hmm.
of finding out that there is something there that
Exactly.
needs to be dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah. So my message to all the people that I talk to is like, it's good to know early because you live. Like
Right.
I was talking to one of my customers. I said, I'm on disability. So I'm sorry, but if there's anything that I can do for you, give me a call. And I told her what I had. And this lady, 35. I said, oh my
Mhm.
God, I'm going through the same thing. But mine is stage 4. Stage
Oh
4 with
my.
2 kids.
Oh.
And she was working and going through chemo. I'm
Mhm.
sure that because she doesn't want to exhaust all her disability day. And here I am thinking, oh my goodness, I only have stage one. My kids are
Mhm.
grown. And this young lady is going through all of that while having to work. I mean,
Right.
I only listen. I don't ask questions. Like I didn't
Mhm.
ask like, when did you find out? How big was it? But a
Right.
lot of time from my personal experience with friends who have cancer earlier than me, like in
Mhm.
their 30s, many happen when they were like pregnant, especially the
Yeah.
one that's hormone positive like me, because your
Right.
hormonal thing changed so much,
Mhm.
right? That certain things just grow in you when it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
So you really have to stay on top of that, especially when you're going through such change in hormonal aspect of your physicality, even if
Mhm.
you're 30 something.
Yeah.
I just gave you two examples of 30 something that had
Right.
it when they were pregnant. I don't know about the protocol, and I think we need to do a better job because right now, when you talk to someone, they say, "Oh, the insurance won't cover unless you pass 40."
Right.
Right? But
Yep.
what if you're 30 and if you feel the lump? But by the time you feel the lump, it could be too late
Mhm.
because I could feel my lump. It was so small; it's 2.88 millimeter. But
Yeah.
so those are something that I think young people need to be more cognizant of. If they
Mhm.
feel something, just don't wait.
Yes, absolutely. And any change that doesn't seem normal for you, you really do need to be your own advocate. And people say that a lot, but it's the truth. When you are in a doctor's office and they have the things that they need to get through and make sure that they check you out, and they say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And they seem like they're in a hurry, and you don't want to be, particularly women, don't want to be the person holding them up. You want to be a good
Hmm.
patient. Um, you still have to speak up for yourself because they are there to help you and they want to help you. That's why they got into medicine. So you say what you need to say. And if you don't feel like they're listening to you, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you should probably get a second opinion
Hmm.
because as you go through life, you know more and more, and you're more certain of yourself that nobody knows your body better than you do. And if you feel like something's not right, you talk to somebody until someone pays attention.
Yeah, like don't put it off because sometimes when we talk about cancer, people always just think, oh my God, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to hear it. It's like you don't hear, you don't see. And to me,
Right.
I understand where that coming from. Let's say 20 years ago, when you hear cancer, everybody's gonna die. The technology, the advancement in medicine have changed so much. The new message that I'm trying to tell people that I know, certain kind of cancer early detection, you will be brand new in a year if you take good care of it. People
Mhm.
need to have that confidence that
Right.
early if you detect something early, you save your own life. It's in your hand,
Yeah.
but and don't be fearful like I don't want to know because cancer, I might die.
Right.
So that's something that have to be really, they have to be more educated. And that's why I like to share my experience because there's so many people who still cannot say the word breast cancer.
Right.
For whatever reason, I know that there's a lot of stigma. We as a woman, we attach beauty and attractiveness to breast. I say, yeah, but you're not going to have anything left if you die.
Right.
So that's something that we need to remove the stigma
Hmm.
that because let me share this. Like, for example, when I was talking to my husband, I said, there's a lot of stigma. As a man, he said, why? He
Hmm.
doesn't get it. I said,
Hmm.
because with woman is a sign of beauty and how you attract, you know.
Hmm.
He said, oh, but that's silly. But we are silly sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
the goal
Well,
is
and
like that people just don't share knowledge and then we can do a better job at surviving breast
right.
cancer. Let's
Yes.
say early detection is 95%. By more talking, let's try to kick it up to 99. That's my goal.
Absolutely. And you touched on something there that leads me to my next question, which is navigating the health system.
Hmm.
It is so complicated, especially for people who don't have a medical background or pharmacology or any of that allied health, arena. How can someone who doesn't have familiarity with the healthcare system know what to do when they hear any diagnosis? Yours, your example and your experience is cancer, but really, if you receive any diagnosis, are there some general steps that you can share with the audience about how you can navigate the system?
I can share with you how I did it, but then at the same time, I'm very empathetic about not everybody have the same education to digest the medical terminology diagnosis. And there's no easy way to solve that because
Mhm.
one thing that I'm more like a problem solver. So I'm always like, how could we bridge that gap? Like I
Yeah.
can sit there in front of the doctor and get it like this, and you can have someone sitting next to me and to the doctor and don't even know certain term. It's not
Hmm.
their fault, but the gap is so big now. So I was
Right.
thinking that maybe there could be some kind of like a buddy kind of service. I know there's
Mm.
a lot of like what do you call it? What you're doing, nonprofit helping with the information, right?
Mhm.
But some people, when they read it, there's not the emotional part that can help. Like
Yeah.
maybe there should be like some kind of, let's say Breast Cancer Society would have a volunteer uh, section that said, okay, someone like me who been through it, let's say we
Hmm.
donate 1 hour of our week or once
Hmm.
a month to match with someone who just diagnose. And let's say
Yeah.
if they need someone to go to the appointment with them or to talk, to walk them through, or
Hmm.
to ease the anxiety, I think that is something that would be so much helpful for that patient because not everybody have support system. We
Right.
blessed, we have loving family. When you sit there, that's like when I was sitting for radiation, there are days that I see someone come with family, with husband, with daughter, and then you see older patient or even younger one who just there alone.
Right.
It could be that they do have loved one somewhere, but it's just something that when I look at it, it saddened me.
Yeah. Oh,
And
absolutely.
and I look at them as I do, they know even how to ask the right question and to question the doctor because not all doctors are created equal too. So that's something.
Yeah.
But in terms of the three things that I found it helpful and that I can pass it along. Here's some good questions, right? What are some good
Hmm.
questions? First of all, you don't want to go in there knowing zero. Now it's a
Mm.
world of internet. You have phone, at least have basic knowledge. And I always go to the reputable website, not
Yep.
comments from people who had it, or go to like, for example, cancer. Go
Hmm.
to, cancer.org. And for
Hmm.
breast cancer, there's one that's for breast cancer. And at least just read the basic, like the stages,
Hmm.
right? How many stages? Like you don't go there and like, what do you mean stage one? Like you wasting time asking questions that you could have kind of be ready because nowadays,
Yeah.
doctors don't have that much patience.
Hmm.
And if you happen to have a nice one who sit down and take time to explain, you bless. But a lot of
Hmm.
time, they just they work on the clock, and sometimes they
Right.
assume you know something. So the first thing is to at least go there with some basic knowledge of the disease that you are facing. Then you
Yeah.
can ask appropriate question. And once, let's say, in my case, you have class 1A
Hmm.
cancer. My first phase is, okay, walk me through the treatment timeline. What is it and the timeline? And the reason I say timeline is because we work, right? We both work. We need to
Yeah.
know how many weeks we need to be out, how many weeks I need help with cleaning, cooking. So,
Right.
so have that map out, okay, and And somehow I didn't have that clear to me. So I assume, okay, I'm taking 6 weeks disability. That should be done with radiation 4 weeks. But then I didn't realize that I have to wait 2 weeks for the oncology test to come back, which you just like sit there
Yeah.
doing nothing. So those are
Nobody
the
knows
things.
that you have a problem yet, so you just have to go to
Yeah.
work and act like everything's normal,
Or
right?
or maybe you should go to work and keep that 2 weeks of disability
Mhm.
towards the end where you
Right.
need more. So that's
Yeah.
just my example. I was sitting 2 weeks of like not doing anything recovering, but I can go to work because I thought
Yeah.
that I was gonna start radiation right after. And that's not.
Yeah.
So I would say, give me the treatment protocol. What's the timeline of
Hmm.
the treatment? And then what's the timeline of my recovery? Because
Mm.
there's so
Yeah.
many phases. Like I finished my radiation 2 weeks ago, as you know, but I still feel very tired because you have 4 weeks of radiation hitting your immune system. So your
Right.
immune system is
Yes.
slowly building up. Like for now, if I have to get up, walk fast, or drive the way I used to drive, I get
Mhm.
woozy
Yeah.
easily because you are not 100%. But
Hmm.
that need to be explained to you so that you can plan your day.
Right. Yes. Yes. Those are all key things to think about. And when you're faced with a diagnosis, either of yourself or of someone you love, it can be hard to think about those things if that's not in your nature.
Mhm.
And it can be hard to think of those things even if it is in your nature because you're preoccupied with other, more existential questions,
Yeah.
right? And so one way to feel like you have some sort of control over a situation where, generally speaking, you don't have much control is to educate yourself, like you
Hmm.
said, and to ask really good questions and knowing the timeline so that you can plan for the things that are within your control to a certain extent. And that can really help to ease anxiety. I would imagine it helped you in that way.
And it's not just, again, this is not just about one person where you have this kind of diagnosis. It's the whole
Hmm.
family get affected.
Right,
It's like a teamwork. So when I say timeline, it's not just about me. It's about,
right.
let's say my husband travel a lot for business.
Hmm.
Then I can tell you, hey, dude, in this 2 weeks, you're not supposed to travel. But the
Right,
thing, if you don't know that, things can really get out of control and then more stress. So it's very important to have the communication with the doctors and the family so that everybody's on the same page.
right. Absolutely. Um, so through your experience, we talked about timelines and things like that. Are there any other questions or any other tidbits you can share about navigating the system itself in terms of um, getting appointments that you need or talking with specialists or things like that that you might need as part of your care?
Yes, one thing that I found to be extremely helpful living I live in Connecticut. Northeast has the best option of specialists that you can pick from. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm saying this because I realize that regionally it's different. So
Hmm.
my suggestion would be always go to big hospital that has breast cancer center because
Hmm.
when they have something like this, all of their care is coordinated. They would have a patient navigation that help you go through that.
Hmm.
And a lot of time when you just go in to a standalone OBGYN, right? And let's say they refer you to get mammogram, so you go to another location for that. And then they
Yep.
have to send the result back to your GYN. And then that GYN, which it's take a long time for that process.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you, like in my case, I use a multi-specialty group that everything
Mhm.
is in one roof, right?
Oh,
So for
excellent.
example, my GYN said, oh, June, you need to have your mammography, go down the hall. And when the doctor said, oh, well, your breast is dense, you need an ultrasound, go to the
Mm.
next room. And once the result they get the result, go back to GYN. Oh, this is what you have. Now you have to see breast surgeon. So when they pull out my chart, it's
Mhm.
all in there
Yeah.
because the number one, medical error is like when you don't have all the information together because
Right.
your primary care is in this building with another group that use a different electronic medical record that cannot be communicated. God forbid you
Mhm.
have to get a paper copy and mail it to them. How long will that take, right?
Right.
People don't
Yeah.
think about the logistic, but those are the extra time that add on
Mhm.
to your ability to move. Let's say the whole situation is 10 step. If you cannot
Yeah.
move past step one because of all of this, everything's going to be delayed. So my
Right.
my positive experience has been because I was able to find a place where they have all of that in one roof.
Yes.
So if they can do that, I think that would really help move things along at
Right.
a good speed. And you want closure. You don't want this thing to drag out. Oh, I have
Right.
to take the test. And because there's a lot of tests involved before they can do anything.
Mhm.
Like let me walk you through so once I was diagnosed, I said,
Mhm.
the first thing I told my surgeon, I want it out. Okay, how
Yes.
soon can you do it?
Right.
So, but with that, I give her the strength. Oh my God, this woman is like real ready to fight. So she's on board. But okay,
Mhm.
before I do that, you need an MRI. And sometimes MRI can take a week
Yeah.
because of whatever, healthcare, get prior off. It's like, how soon can you call someone and squeeze me in? And
Mhm.
she was able to do that because it's within the same practice. Because
Yeah.
you cannot call another company and say, oh, I have a patient. And they're like, no, they still have to wait on, online for the next available. But when you have everything in the same uh, roof, things move quicker. So I was able
Right.
to get the MRI the next day because they want to
Okay.
make sure that it doesn't spread. And then once that, I
Hmm.
can use that to schedule my lumpectomy.
Okay.
You see, just imagine if you can get your MRI another week. Your
Right.
lumpectomy is not going to happen until after that.
Yeah.
And then oncology test for the onc type, all of that gonna delay the next phase. So to have all of that test up front, the
Hmm.
day that you have mine, they took out the specimen and they have the test that day, but they're waiting.
Right.
Yeah, but so always make sure that you trying to find a breast cancer center that have everything in the same practice.
Right. Yeah. And well, that makes so much sense. Not to trivialize it, but to put it another way, if you go and you want a sandwich for lunch, you don't
Mhm.
drive to 10 different buildings and collect all of the ingredients and then make your own sandwich.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly. And
you want to eat, you go to a place that puts it all together for you
yes,
and you can keep moving.
yeah. And breast cancer is something is more common than other cancer. So I would
Mhm.
say city, town would have something that
Yeah.
have all of the component that gonna help you heal faster and be supportive. So always
Right.
look for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the key phrases you used, and I guess it varies depending on the health system, but a care manager or a care
Mhm.
navigator,
Yeah.
those key phrases, if you can find someone or a practice that has someone in that role, they coordinate all of the
Mhm.
care and they help you go through the whole thing and let you know where you need to be and when.
Yes.
So that is critical to making sure that you move through the process faster.
And they are really compassionate. A lot of them are nurses,
Yep.
and most reputable breast cancer center have phenomenal service because they know that patients are going through a lot, and there's
Right.
a lot of steps, even for someone that like me who know what to expect. But
Mhm.
all of different. This is post op now, right? I have to see oncologist. From the surgery now, he's going to be the person who oversee the whole case. Right? Then I
Hmm.
have to have bone density test. I have to have the GYN and then maybe endocrinology. So
Hmm.
all of that um, different appointment at certain times, right? Like I
Yeah.
cannot see an endocrinologist until I have one A, B, C done. So all of that can be very, very stressful, especially me. Like, for example, I'm back to work
Yeah.
and you're trying to like, can you do all of that in one day?
Right.
You know? But you cannot do that if, let's say, you are not within the same specialty practice.
Yeah.
Like they're not flexible. Like when
Right.
you in the same, they're kind of like, okay, we want to keep the business in the same place. It helped.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are all incredibly helpful points, and things for people to think about and
Mhm.
explore. I know um, a lot of university hospitals and teaching
Mhm.
hospitals have care navigators.
Yeah.
So if you live near one of those
Hmm.
larger organizations, that's certainly something that you should ask about. And if they have it available, you should absolutely use those services.
Yeah, I highly recommend it, especially for those who are less well versed in, the healthcare
Mhm.
system, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
roadblock that the insurance put there just to make things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Especially when certain treatment are expensive, and you want to
Yes.
make sure that you have someone who's really looking out for you. And those care manager they're looking out for you. They want you to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And talking about people who are looking out for you, um, what is something that friends, family, possibly your employer, did to make things easier while you were going through diagnosis and treatment? What did you appreciate? What was helpful to you? Because some of the folks listening to the podcast um, are looking to make life easier for the caregivers that they know and for the
Hmm.
patients that they
Hmm.
know. So, any
Okay.
suggestions?
So if you a caregiver who work for a big corporation, make sure that you know how to maximize your benefit. Like your
Mm,
disability, make sure that you reach out to your HR and talk about it. They're very
mm,
sympathetic and understandable. They're trying to work with you, but you still need to know your rights. Like for
mhm,
example, I was in New York all my life until last year. So when I
mhm,
have to file for disability, I have to file disability under Connecticut law, which I'm like, what?
mm.
And which is
Yeah.
so every state have different law in terms of
Mhm,
disability. Be familiar with that so that
mhm,
you don't have a disruption in your pay, because
mhm.
that's the last thing that you want, right? It's not getting
Right.
a check and you have your rent, you have your electricity. So the day that you get your diagnosis, I would say go to disability page on your state and do the
Mhm.
research of what need to be done. A lot of
Yeah.
times you can download the form, have it ready, so that when you go to the doctor, you have it ready. Because
Mhm.
it's very difficult, I don't know about other state, just to see your doctor or just to get them on the phone.
Yeah.
It's very difficult trying to say, hey, I left the form. Did you mail it? Or in my case, she said, oh, I faxed it. And then I'm waiting for my check. It's like, where's my check? I call Connecticut Disability. Oh, well, the doctor forgot to sign. So I have to call her, have her sign. So those another week of you not getting. So stay on
Mhm.
top of that. And also another thing that's really helpful, in my case, I was lucky that I don't have to take beyond what's covered 100%.
Mhm.
But in many cases, you're going to be out longer. So
Yeah.
when you pay for your benefit for the company that I work, I think this is the law. You have an option of getting disability, long-term disability at 50%, but
Mhm.
you can also go for 70% and then you pay in a little bit. Like the
Mhm.
company will charge something against your paycheck. I opt for 70% way back because I've seen people who've been out. And the last thing you need is I only get paid 50%. right? So always make
Right.
sure that you maximize that because you don't,
Hmm.
no one is planning to get sick.
Right.
But
Yep.
nowadays, when you have a major, let's say surgery,
Hmm.
6 weeks, they pay 12, I think up to 12 weeks, 100%. But let's say you have some episode cancer that you're going to be in and out, in and out. You're going to
Right.
exhaust that 12 weeks really quickly. And the
Yep.
last thing you want to do is to get paid 50%. So check your disability benefit, max it up to 70%. So that
Hmm.
would be my advice in terms of if you work for the company that have that kind of option.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to talk with your HR person that's
Mhm.
human resources, and see because they will help you navigate this as well
Mhm.
and through your benefits and all of those things because that in and of itself can be really complicated.
Mhm.
And as the employee, you should be the one talking with the folks at work and coordinating that. Um, but it's also something that you could outsource to someone in your family to help navigate that because
Mhm.
you're sick, and you should be focusing on getting better.
Yeah.
Um, so if you have someone that you can appoint, either a spouse or if you have assigned power of attorney, medical power of attorney
Mhm.
to anyone, whether it's your grown children or a sibling or someone, um, that's another really key thing to make sure that you have because you need people who can make decisions on your behalf so that you can focus on recovery.
You see, like this is the things that, like what we're doing right now, it should be available on the nonprofit site. Like, okay, if someone's going through this, you have volunteer who been through this, who can walk you through, or just listen. You know, if
Yep.
you donate half an hour of your time, that would go such a long way in putting the people minds at peace when they're
Hmm.
going through this rough time. That's to
Yeah.
me, I feel that it's missing. It could be that,
Yes.
some people don't have time or didn't think about it or don't want to carry the weight of other people. To
Mhm.
me, I don't see it that way. I see it very therapeutic because I
Right.
always believe in the knowledge gain, but not share is a knowledge waste.
Yes.
All of this is thing I learned. If I cannot share and make someone's life a little bit easier,
Hmm.
it's wasted. And
Yeah.
that is another way of trying to pay it forward.
Hmm. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing everything that you've talked about today. I know it's very personal, but like we said in the beginning, it's so helpful to others to hear people talking about it openly because it enables them and empowers them to have the same types of conversations. So I have one last question.
Mhm.
How is your health today?
I'm good. I would say my energy is like at 80% now. Is so maybe another week I would go back to being my normal self, that I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to take a break if I have to drive a long distance, so right now I have to like do it in a small, like
Yeah.
anything, for example, an hour drive exhausts me. But
Yeah.
other than that, I'm good. And one thing about when I talk about when you have this buddy system that you
Mhm.
share with someone who's going through, for them to see me like this,
Yes.
the
Yep.
visual, to put the face, I went through this and here I am, strong. You can do the same. That is more than reading anything. And that's just my personal opinion. Like you give them that will to fight, like, oh wow, she looks good. She's healed. I can do that. She went through that. If you can give them that little oomph just to fight and be positive, it just, that's the least anyone can do, and to show your kindness. That's just me.
Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared with us today. If anyone in our audience has questions, you can contact Carefulist the podcast on our website, which is carefulist.com, or through any of our social media channels.
Mhm.
June, we hope you continue to be well, and
Thank
thank you so
you.
much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. And I hope that the content is helpful in helping people navigate through tough time.
Thank you.